Welcome to the Elite Power Moves podcast, where we unlock the secrets to level up in all areas of life. I'll be interviewing some of the world's top performers in their fields so that you can uncover and learn the strategies that have led to their overall success and apply it to your own life. Karen, welcome to the Elite Power Moves podcast. Thank you so much for sharing energy today. Really had fun researching you and looking forward to delving into your experience.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Karen, your work highlights the importance of both talent and energy in driving performance. How do you believe leaders can inspire their teams to harness both in the workplace?
Look, I think the starting point is for leaders to understand that just because somebody has talent doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to behave in ways that allow them to effectively apply that talent. So, for me, the inspiration piece actually starts with creating a really clear picture for everybody about the mission we're on as a team. So, obviously sometimes organizations articulate that as a vision statement, but often what I find is that the level of insight is lacking in the average vision statement doesn't actually give people enough insight to understand where we're trying to get to, obviously, as an organization, and what matters most. So what will success look like for us when we actually reach our destination? So creating a really clear picture of that future is step one. But then it's also about making sure that every member of their team actually understands why they matter and the role that they individually or collectively in their sub-team. So we could have a business vision and a business strategy. What role does each team need to play? And then what role does each individual need to play? Because when we talk about, inspiring or motivating human beings, a key influencer of that is that people actually feel like they're part of something that is meaningful. They're part of something where they can actually make a difference. So, getting really clear, as I said, on why do you matter? How do you actually impact our collective ability to ultimately be successful? And then keeping people engaged with that. It's super important that we have visibility around, where are we at in this journey to actually achieve these outcomes? Again, it's super common for leaders to say, here's our vision, here's our strategy, and that's the last that people actually hear of it. So making sure that we have really clear goals that people can strive for, but then they also know how they're progressing. So as we're going down the path, that we're actually stopping, we're celebrating, we're smelling our own roses, if you like, recognizing that, yes, we have actually achieved some exciting stuff. Because fundamentally what we're talking about is maintaining people's sense of engagement and desire to actually be part of a winning team.
Yeah.
So, to sum all that up, let's be really clear on what the dream looks like. Let's be really clear on what everyone's role is to achieve it. And then let's make sure people have that visibility of progress, including those moments where we actually stop and celebrate and say, yay, us. We are ultimately getting there.
It's a really great point you brought up, Karen, because I personally like to work on the why and reminding our team why we're doing it. For example, I run 3 companies and one of them being a gym, and our why is having a non-judgmental, family-friendly gym that supports the health and wellness of our community and sets generational health for their families. And this not only aligns our customers that align with us, but it also reminds our staff what we're doing, when times do get tough. I think that I always talk about how energy management is time management too. So if we're vibrating on that energy and that fulfillment and that culture, then we're going to have more productive staff and more happier staff that are looking forward to turning up to work.
Yeah, look, I absolutely agree. I spend a lot of my time helping leaders to understand how do we deliberately influence our team spirit. And fundamentally, our team spirit is the energy that they have in reserve at any given moment. And people are unquestionably more likely to be optimistic, to be driven, to go above and beyond, to bring discretionary efforts, so to behave in all of the ways in which that enables them and the team and therefore the business to be successful when they're energized. The flip side of that is when people are drained of energy, they're more likely to be pessimistic. They're more likely to conserve energy and only go as far as they have to, which I describe as being like a compliant contribution where people are doing just enough to keep their job. Whereas obviously what we want to create a thriving business is that everybody is passionately engaged in doing everything that they can to enable success. And if we don't have energy, it's just not going to happen.
I think that's a really good point too, Karen, because I always talk to my team about peak performance and about obviously being a peak performance coach. The first step to peak performance happens when you're stopping and recovering. And that also links to when you're stopping and looking at the achievements that you've made and celebrating with your team, because that's a time that we're recharging the batteries. And as we're all energy, that's going to 10x it.
Yeah. That's right. And, my business obviously is called Corporate Dojo for a reason. And that reason is that I grew up as a martial artist. So I spent over 25 years teaching, competing, training in karate. And I went into the business world and just observed so many strong parallels between what it takes to enable an athlete or, somebody in the dojo to be successful, and how that is exactly the same as what it takes within a business environment. And, again, as we're talking about, a key part of that is actually influencing people's mindsets and their behaviors. And that rest and recovery time is as important as the actual training time or the competing time. As we know as athletes that, our body needs to recover in order to be strong. But I think in the business world, we sometimes underestimate that link between the strength of our bodies and our minds and our capacity to perform at our peak. So as you point out, the rest and recovery is allowing people to actually maintain a sense of balance in their lives. But it's also the recharge from those positive moments, those things that actually energize our spirit and, uplift us so that we can then take the next step or, continue down the path.
100%. I'm a big fan of stopping and resting, because I always say this, like, to my high achievers: you can't rev the Ferrari flat out all the time. Otherwise, the engine's going to burn out and you're going to blow up.
That's
You need
right.
to stop and park it and rest it, fuel it,
Yeah.
and then you're ready to take the next journey.
Yeah.
Karen,
We can take that analogy so far because I suddenly imagined also, making sure we've got water in the windscreen wipers mixed up so we can maintain clarity of where we're heading, that we've got a clear vision. Again, our minds can become cluttered and stop serving us when we're tired, when we're
100%.
running on empty.
Karen, in your experience, what are the key traits that set resilient leaders apart, especially when managing teams through challenging times?
I think the key here is emotional intelligence. Leaders who, if we think about, okay, well, what do we mean by resilience? It's that ability to bounce back from setbacks, the ability to keep persisting through challenging times, to maintain that clarity of thought or an insight, make good decisions when the going gets tough. And as we've already spoken about, what absolutely enables that is a sense of balance and making sure that we are actually looking after our own health and well-being so that we can be good leaders. Then related to that, but beyond that, is the emotional intelligence piece, that as a starting point, I have self-awareness. So I understand myself, I understand my own thoughts. One of the biggest drainers in life, or one of the biggest obstacles to success, is our thinking. So having enough awareness to recognize, actually, I'm getting tired now, I'm getting frustrated now, or I'm starting to make hasty decisions because things are challenging. So I'm starting to make fear-based decisions rather than the right decisions. It is all critical to then being able to make conscious choices to be able to navigate both ourselves and our teams down the path. And then, again, to maintain resilience requires mental health. So having the ability to self-regulate. So an example of that is that ability to recognize what thoughts and thought processes are serving me which are actually undermining my confidence or my energy levels, whatever it might be, and then to be able to make deliberate choices around what thinking am I going to entertain. And then obviously that's also about then being be able to regulate our own emotion. So if I'm as a leader allowing my own frustration or my own fear to then impact how I communicate with my team, I might be undermining my team's hopefulness for the future. I might be undermining their sense of confidence, as I say, but also their own energy levels. So we don't want to be a drainer of our own team's fuel, right? Otherwise, we're letting down our own tires, to use the car analogy. So again, resilient leaders have that ability to understand themselves, to regulate their own thinking, their own emotion, and to self-manage so that they can be the best version of themselves to have the best possible impact on their team.
Karen, it's a really good point because, as you know, like when we're stressed, our brain actually shrinks and we turn into more of a reactive leader. And it snowballs as, like, if you put a rotten apple in a box of apples, it's going to start rotting the rest of the apples.
Right.
And like I find that the leaders that I work with and some of the top performers, they can go through immense stress and they can get up and in 5 minutes regulate their central nervous system, lower cortisol by taking a few deep breaths, and then go back into the fight and figure out what they need to do by thinking clearly and having good cognitive ability.
Yeah, absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because in contrast, what I see is leaders who lack that ability, they spiral down themselves. But then, as we're saying, they have a flow-on impact to the rest of the team. There's no doubt that the human spirit is infectious. So if you, as a leader, are doubting your ability to win, your team will be, even if you're not directly saying that, your team will be feeling that. They'll be sensing that through the way in which you turn up.
That's right. And I find that you make the wrong decisions and second guess things and want to check everyone's work. And then it takes up the most valuable thing you have, your fulfillment, because you're bringing work home to your family and you're not
Yeah.
fully switched off and being present. And as you know, like I said before, we're all energy. And when we manage our energy, it then manages our most valuable resource, our time output.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, sometimes, people need to understand that being focused at times is about identifying what not to do as much as what to do. And so in that what not to do category might be things like micromanaging. And I'm micromanaging because I'm fearful and I'm wanting to get a sense of control. But that typically undermines our ability to be focused on the right things as a leader. It undermines our ability to have relationships with our people where they feel genuinely empowered and they feel supported to actually do their job. I coach a lot of leaders who spend too much time talking about the what's wrong stuff with their team. So they're always focusing on what's not working well, as opposed to, obviously we need to address challenges. That's obvious, but often the opportunity to focus on what is working and what's going well is missed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's critical.
I do find that the subconscious mind comes into play when you're a leader as well, because when we're looking at the bad, that's all we see. That's all we create in our reality. But when we see the positive and the good things and have gratitude, then that's what we see. And that's what has a ripple effect into our team.
Yeah,
Karen,
absolutely right.
Karen, you advocate for a results-based leadership approach. How do you balance the need for performance with maintaining a strong people-centered leadership style?
Yeah. So the way I describe this is adopting an integrated leadership approach. And what I mean by that is that we've got a healthy balance between our head and our heart. The simple truth is, for the overwhelming majority of businesses, success comes from leveraging the human potential in our organizations. So driving results obviously starts with being clear on what a success look like, and then having a culture of accountability where, we're holding ourselves accountable as individuals, that we are collectively accountable for actually getting to the outcome as well. So we absolutely want that keen focus on the results, but recognizing that the results come from human beings who are talented, energized, engaged, and are doing enough of the right things. So we can't optimize business results unless we're optimizing the human part of the equation. In order to be influential as a leader, what is non-negotiable is that we have trust and respect. So my ability to influence you comes down to your willingness to let me, and if what you are thinking, if I'm trying to give you coaching feedback, or I'm trying to, help you to be better in whatever way, if you don't trust me, then your guard is up, your mind is closed. So the window of opportunity to influence is really narrow. Whereas if we have deep trust and respect in our relationship, now I'm able to, or willing to, let you in and to be influenced by your guidance and your leadership. So those strong relationships and that trust and respect, as I've said, is the foundation upon which we then become influential and be able to then influence how are people thinking, how are they feeling, how are they behaving, to what extent do they have the capabilities, and actually growing their knowledge or their skills or their talent. All of that becomes doable when I've got a strong relationship with my people. So, the people part, as I'm saying, is a necessary requirement to achieve the results side of the equation. And what I find is that, I have an exercise I work with leaders to kind of reflect on, do I tend to be more on the results side of a spectrum versus a people side of a spectrum? And at each end of the spectrum, we have extremes that don't work. So at the extreme end of the results-driven leader, we've got the dictator, we've got the boss. They're all about the results. They don't care about the human part of the equation. At the other end of the extreme, we've got the leader who's so people-focused that they're actually more interested in being people's friend. And neither ends of that spectrum actually works. You've got leaders who are too hard, or you've got leaders who are too soft. The reality is success happens in the middle, hence why I refer to it as that integrated approach, where I am results-oriented. I am absolutely all about accountability, but I achieve those results by leveraging the human potential because I've got strong relationships with my people, so I can be influential.
Karen, that's a really good insight there. I find that the great leaders build the culture, and then they build the team, and the team builds the business.
Yeah.
And it works on autoplane. It really does. Like, it's just something that happens automatically. If you have that great culture, and you have the reason why you do what you do, and that's linked to the culture, then the team will build your business for you.
And what I find with culture is that sometimes leaders perceive that managing culture is about creating an environment where people like being here, and it's safe, it's psychologically, physically safe. So there's a lot of focus on the how do we feel about one another and being in this environment. And that is important. But other aspects of culture that don't often have as much focus is on, what are the cultural drivers of peak performance? So are we ambitious? As an organization, do we typically think in ambitious ways? Are we driven? Do we hold ourselves accountable? And so obviously that's let's achieve the outcomes, but then there's also elements of culture that drive our effectiveness as a team. So do we tend to engage in honest, robust debate with one another? Do we actually make good decisions because we're challenging each other's thinking? And then it's also about governance. What are the things that culturally drive making sure that we're operating in line with the law and, commonly accepted moral standards or integrity? So again, I would encourage leaders to think beyond just it feels good to be here, we're nice to each other elements of culture, to really, because culture fundamentally is how do we typically think and behave.
Yeah.
And, that, as I said before, that element around being driven and ambitious and determined and courageous are as important as being nice and respectful to each other.
100% agree there, Karen. Karen, your book, Corporate Dojo, discusses spirited leadership. Can you explain how leaders can cultivate that spirit within their teams to drive both performance and team culture?
Yeah, look, some of this we've already spoken about. So I think about spirit as our energy levels, as we've been talking about. In my experience, there's some things in the workplace that are mission critical. The first of it is the quality of relationships. So you need to care about how people treat each other. So again, we've spoken about that cultural environment that is respectful. Because the reality is every relationship I have, whether it's with my peers, whether it's with my manager, whether it's with my customers, has the potential to either energize my spirit or drain my spirit. So relationships are key. I've had leaders say to me over the years, well, I'm not their mother or their father. I shouldn't have to tell them how to play nicely. And my response to that is, welcome to the world of leadership. It's your job. It's your job to make sure that the people have healthy relationships. So obviously that starts with, who do you choose to bring into your team? Recruitment is the backbone of your people strategy. If you're bringing the wrong people into the environment in the first place, good luck and may the force be with you, because everything gets hard from there. So making sure we're bringing the right people together, and that we have those standards around decency and respect and empathy and collaboration with one another. It's then about influencing people's sense of belief. This is about belief in the future, as well as my ability to influence that future. So as we spoke about earlier, let's get super clear on what's the dream, where we're trying to go. Demonstrating to the team why you have belief and faith in our ability to actually get there. Influencing them, that sense of progress and success towards achieving that, because there's visibility of our goals, etc. And then the ability to influence that future piece comes down to genuinely giving people a voice. As a leader, making sure that people feel heard, that they have the opportunity to influence your thinking and your decision making, so they have some degree of agency. And also that might include autonomy in their own role, genuinely empower people so they feel like they can be part of driving the outcome. Then it's absolutely key that people feel that sense of enjoyment in their work. Again, I think this can be underestimated, that people who don't like doing what they do are never going to be super energized and are never ultimately going to help us to achieve the best possible outcomes that we can. So sometimes, my advice to leaders is ask people, do you actually like it? The examples I often point to is, how many of us have met a school teacher that clearly doesn't like kids, and how damaging can that person be in their approach, or the HR person that doesn't actually like people. And there's an endless list of people who are just fundamentally not into it. So we want to be actually enjoying what we're doing. And that's obviously not enjoying every aspect of our job. We're all going to have to do things that are less fun. But to the extent it's possible, helping people to have that sense of enjoyment in their work with one another. It's also about people having a strong sense of purpose and meaning. So I've already spoken to having a vision, but to your point earlier, why are we doing what we're doing? Why does this actually matter? Our mission as an organization and our purpose as a team actually makes a difference. Again, can have a huge flow-on impact to how people are feeling. So those are some of the key ones. Obviously what we have as a leader is tools in our toolkit to influence the human state. And so I've already spoken to recruitment, right? Let's get it right in the first place. But then also, how do we reward and recognize people? So that's everything from how often am I saying thank you? How often am I actually acknowledging the stuff that we want more of? That can again have a profound impact on people's energy levels and that vitality that helps us to drive the best possible outcomes. How do we leverage our performance management approaches? Are we focused as much on people's growth and learning and evolution as a professional? Or are we just talking about what's not working? Nothing's going to drain the human spirit more readily than just being the guy or girl that focuses just on everything that's going wrong and not giving reasonable credit. So, again, just thinking about what are all the things I do from a people perspective and the approach that I take, what impact does that then have on people's energy levels?
100%. I really find after, having 20 staff myself, bringing in the wrong team member, a B grade player is not only going to affect yourself, but it's also going to affect your A grade players as well. And it can be
Absolutely.
quite toxic and affect not only the team, but also the business.
Absolutely. I mean, there's research that shows one of the reasons top performers leave a business is because they're sick and tired of leaders not dealing with the underperformers, because they're either having to tolerate crappy behavior or they're having to carry an unfair load because other people are not doing what they need to be doing. So
100%.
it's absolutely key.
Karen, as a contributor to multiple high-profile publications, you share your insights on leadership. What would your top piece of advice for leaders looking to develop resilience in both themselves and their teams?
Yeah. So as I spoke about earlier, focus on your own emotional intelligence. I won't go into more detail around that. I'll just note that if I had a magic wand, I would choose to give the world emotional intelligence, because the flow on impact to everything else would be massive, right? Including our own ability to be resilient. But what I'll also point out is that, focusing on your own well-being is key. I've been to burnout and back a number of times in my career. I don't recommend it. What I've learned is that balance is actually a choice. So it's about getting to a place where we accept that I need to be work fit. I need to be capable of being at a peak performance state when I'm engaged in the job that I do. And in order to do that, I need balance. It means I'm spending enough time with my loved ones. I'm getting enough sleep. I'm eating well. I'm exercising. So, if you want to be a resilient leader that is consistent, that has a positive impact on your team spirit, then look after yourself.
100%. I like to work around the philosophy in my formula, which is discipline increases your self-worth and self-love. That
Yeah.
then increases your energy. And if you multiply that by healthy habits, it's then going to
Yeah.
increase your most valuable resource, your time output. And I also always tell the leaders that I coach that you need to put the 4 pillars on your calendar first, whether it be family, health and recovery, sleep, nutrition, and mindset. And that has to be the foundation, because if we're going to build ourselves up as leaders, if we're going to build a house on sand, eventually it's going to sink and sway and we're going to get burnt out. We're not going to be performing at our best. But if we set a foundation, this is going to lead to overall fulfillment in all areas of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as I said, that's the one thing I finally learned. Took me a few goes at it. Finally learned that downtime, that family time, the fun time is not a nice to have. It's a prerequisite to being able to perform at my best within my business. So I no longer work weekends. I finish work at a sensible hour, because again, as you've pointed out, that ability to be focused, to be disciplined, to make good decisions, to drive outcomes forward, it's entirely more likely that I'm doing that at my best if I'm healthy.
Yeah, 100%. And it's sometimes I feel like, I don't know if this makes sense to you, Karen, but I feel like we're brought up in a generation of, like, my grandfather come back from war and he taught my dad that you need to work hard, you need to grind, you need to tough it out and not ask for help. And this leads to unfulfillment, because we're not meant to rev the engine all the time. We're meant to have that balance. We're not taught to, dedicate our time to the most important things in our life, which is our family and our health. And that's going to 10x our performance down the track.
Absolutely. I'm still a fan of working hard, right? I'm just not working stupid hours, right? So again, we can be focused and disciplined and ambitious and driven and really hustling to make the outcomes happen in the time that we're dedicating to our work. It's when that time then starts to rob us of all of the other things that are necessary that it becomes a problem. So, to your listeners, what I'd say is you don't have to accept balance is not about not working hard. Balance is actually about working smart so that we're capable of being disciplined, focused, driven, etc.
I feel sometimes with the really high end leaders that I coach too, sometimes balance isn't even a word. They just integrate everything into their life, their family, health, their relationships, and it's all part of the one moving the needle thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like, just for example, like getting up in the morning, this morning I drank pink salt, lemon, helps me with my hydration, which is going to also help me with my pH levels, my digestive system, which is going to help me, to have more cognitive ability.
Yeah.
Exercise, release dopamine, serotonin, endorphins just before I'm about to learn and remember. And then I
Yeah.
tackle my biggest task. So yeah, still working hard is super important. But if you work smarter on yourself, then you're going to get more done than anyone else.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Karen,
And once I started to get this into my head, things like going to the gym every day stopped being hard because,
yeah,
previously I'd think of it as an obligation. I really should do this. Whereas now the mindset is more, I really want this because I want that endorphins kick. I want to feel energized. I don't want to slog through my day or my weeks or my months. I actually want to feel vibrant while I'm doing this. I don't want it to be so hard. Therefore, the gym time is a benefit. It's something that I actually really like.
yeah. It's putting into yourself, filling up your cup before you fill up everyone else's.
Yeah. Definitely.
Karen, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us on the Elite Power Moves podcast.
Thank you.
You're obviously incredible at what you do. And I've actually learned some good skills today myself, and looking forward to sharing you with our listeners.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for tuning in today, and I hope you found the discussion useful. Our goal is to positively impact the well-being of 1 million people's lives just like you by sharing the experience and knowledge of some of the world's top performers. So you don't miss out on any key strategies to help you succeed, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. And if you think you may know someone that would benefit from this episode, join us in our mission of impacting 1 million lives and share it with your friends.